The sun beat down relentlessly on the Arizona desert. Silas rode alone as he always had for the past 5 years. He had no family, no home, only his horse, Thunder, and the endless road stretching before him. But that day something would change his life forever, a faint cry, almost imperceptible beneath the hot desert wind. Silas stopped his horse and listened closely. He wasn't imagining things. Someone was crying near the rocks. He dismounted carefully and walked toward the sound. What he found broke his heart in two. A child no older than 8, he was sitting among the stones, his face covered in dust and tears. His clothes were those of an Apache boy, but he was completely alone, abandoned in the middle of nowhere. "Hey there, little one," Silas said in a soft voice, kneeling in front of him. "Are you okay? Where's your family?" The boy looked up. His dark eyes were full of fear, but also something else, hope, as if he had been praying for someone to appear. "I got lost," the boy whispered in broken Spanish. "I went out to find water and couldn't find my way back." Silas felt a lump in his throat. He knew that feeling, the loneliness, the fear of not knowing if anyone would come for you. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ahanu." "Well, Ahanu, I'm Silas, and I promise I'm going to take you back to your family." The boy tried to stand, but his legs trembled. Then Silas noticed something that made his heart sink even more. The boy's feet, his moccasins, were shredded, completely destroyed. He had walked for hours, maybe days, practically barefoot over the scorching desert stones. Without a second thought, Silas sat on a rock and began removing his own boots. "What are you doing, sir?" Ahanu asked, confused. "Something I should have done the moment I saw you." Silas took his worn but sturdy leather boots and placed them in front of the boy. "They'll be too big," he said with a half smile, "but they'll protect your feet until we reach your village." Ahanu stared at the boots, eyes wide. No one had ever given him anything so valuable. In his culture, a man's boots were his most prized possession, and this stranger was giving them away without asking for anything in return. "But sir, you'll be barefoot." "I've walked barefoot before," Silas replied with a shrug. "I'll survive. You're just a child. You need me more than I need these boots." Ahanu put on the boots with trembling hands. They were enormous, yes, but in that moment he felt something he hadn't felt in days: safety. Silas lifted him onto Thunder and mounted behind him. "Which way is your village?" he asked. Ahanu pointed north, toward mountains rising against the orange sunset sky. "Over there. My mother must be very worried." "Then let's not waste any more time." And so their journey began. For 2 days they rode under the relentless sun. Silas shared his water, his food, and his stories with little Ahanu. He told him about the northern prairies, the buffalo he had seen, the starry night sleeping under the open sky. Ahanu, in return, spoke of his mother. "Maitna is the most beautiful woman in the whole tribe," the boy said proudly. "She knows how to heal with herbs, she weaves the softest blankets, and she makes the best rabbit stew in existence." "She sounds like a great woman," Silas replied. "She is, but she's alone." "My father died a year ago, and illness took him." Silas fell silent. He understood loneliness better than anyone. "And you, Mr. Silas, do you have a family?" The question struck a deep place in his chest. "No, I lost my parents when I was a little older than you. I've been alone ever since." Ahanu looked at him with a mixture of sadness and curiosity. "That's very sad. No one should be alone." Silas didn't answer. He just kept riding toward the mountains, the boy's words echoing in his mind. No one should be alone. On the 3rd day, they finally spotted the village in the valley. High tippies rose among the trees, and smoke from campfires climbed into the sky. Ahanu shouted with joy, "That's my home, we made it." But Silas wasn't looking at the village. He was looking at the woman running toward them from the camp's entrance. A woman with hair black as night, eyes deep as clear water wells, and a face that reflected days of anguish transforming into pure joy. Maitna. And in that moment, without knowing why, Silas's heart beat in a way it hadn't in years. Maitna ran as she had never run in her life. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. 3 days without news of her son, 3 days imagining the worst, 3 days without sleep, without food, without being able to breathe easily, and now she saw him. "Ahanu, her little Ahanu, alive." "Mother," the boy shouted from the horse. Maitna reached them just as the stranger stopped his horse. She didn't wait for them to dismount. She reached out her arms, and Ahanu jumped straight into them. She held him so tightly she feared she might break him, but she couldn't let go, not after thinking she had lost him forever. "My baby, my little baby," she whispered as tears fell down her cheeks. "You're alive, thank the heavens, you're alive." "I'm fine, mother. This gentleman found me, he saved me." Maitna looked up for the first time at the man who had brought her son back. What she saw left her speechless. A young cowboy, maybe 30. Brown hair under a dusty hat, blue eyes like the dawn sky, a strong jaw covered in several days' beard, and a serene, almost shy expression that contrasted with his rough appearance. But what caught her attention most were his feet. He was barefoot. "Why don't you have boots?" Maitna asked without thinking. Ahanu smiled and pointed to his own feet. "He gave them to me, mother. My moccasins broke, and he gave me his boots so I could walk." Maitna felt the world stop. This man, this complete stranger, had walked barefoot through the desert for days just so her son wouldn't suffer. He had sacrificed his own comfort, his own safety, for a child he didn't even know. "Why?" was all she could ask. Silas dismounted carefully, feeling the stones beneath his sore feet. "Because it was the right thing to do," he answered simply. No child should suffer if it can be avoided. Maitna stared at him. In all her years, she had known many men warriors from her tribe, traders passing through the village. None had ever shown such selfless kindness. Come, she said, making a decision. You must rest. Your feet need attention. That's not necessary, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure the boy got home safe. Now I must continue on my way. Your way to where? The question caught Silas off guard. He opened his mouth to answer, but realized he had no answer. He wasn't going anywhere. He had no destination, no one waiting for him. Maitna seemed to understand his silence. A man who wanders without purpose deserves at least a hot meal and a place to heal his wounds, she said firmly. It's the least I can do for the one who saved my son. Before Silas could protest, several elders of the tribe approached. News of Ahanu's return had spread like wind through the village. An elderly man with completely white hair and deep wrinkles on his face stepped forward. He was Kuruk, the village leader. Is this the man who brought the boy back? He asked, looking Silas up and down. Yes, grandfather, Ahanu replied. His name is Silas, and he gave me his boots. Kuruk looked at the cowboy's bare feet and then at the enormous boots on the child's feet. A slow smile spread across his wrinkled face. A man who gives his boots to a strange child has a noble heart, he declared. Tonight we celebrate. We will have a feast in your honor, cowboy. That's really not necessary, Silas insisted, visibly uncomfortable with the attention. It's not a question, Kuruk replied with authority. It's an order. Maitna, take care of our guest. Let him rest, let him eat, let him heal. Tonight the whole village will thank him. Maitna nodded and took the reins of Silas's horse. Follow me, she said. My tipi is near the river. You can wash and rest there. Silas walked beside her, limping slightly from the wounds on his feet. Ahanu ran ahead, jumping for joy, telling every child he met about his great adventure. Your son is very brave, Silas said. He survived alone in the desert for days. He's all I have, Maitna replied without looking at him. When he disappeared, I felt like my world was ending. I understand. Something in his voice made Maitna turn to look at him. There was pain there, ancient and deep. Do you have children? She asked. No, I have no one. They reached Maitna's tipi. It was modest but cozy, decorated with paintings of eagles and mountains. Sit, she ordered, pointing to a blanket by the fire. I'm going to heal your feet. You don't have to. Silence. Healing is what I do, and you need to be cared for even if you won't admit it. Silas obeyed, and while Maitna prepared the medicinal herbs, he couldn't help but watch her. Her delicate but steady hands, her focused face, the way her black hair fell over her shoulders. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And for the first time in many years, Silas felt something he thought he had forgotten, hope. 3 days had passed since Silas's arrival at the village. 3 days in which Maitna had healed his feet with medicinal herbs. 3 days in which Ahanu never left his side. 3 days in which Silas had begun to feel something he had never experienced before, belonging, but that morning everything changed. Silas was helping Ahanu brush thunder when he heard the shouting. It came from the north end of the village where they kept the horses. The horses, they're taking the horses. Silas ran toward the corral. What he saw made his blood boil. 4 unknown riders were galloping toward the canyon, taking more than 20 of the tribe's horses. Bandits, thieves taking advantage of the village's isolation to steal without consequences. The tribe's warriors were running to their mounts, but the bandits already had too much of a lead. Silas didn't think twice. He leaped onto Thunder and dug his heels into the horse's sides. The horse responded instantly, shooting like an arrow toward the thieves. Silas, wait, Kuruk shouted from behind. There are too many, but Silas didn't listen. He couldn't stop. These people had taken him in, fed him, treated him like family. He wasn't going to let criminals take what little they had. Thunder was the fastest horse Silas had ever ridden. Within minutes, he began closing the distance on the bandits. The leader looked back and saw the lone cowboy pursuing them. He laughed scornfully. It's only one, he shouted to his companions. Ignore him. Big mistake. Silas knew this terrain. During his days of travel with Ahanu, he had studied every rock, every curve, every shortcut of the canyon, and he knew exactly what to do. Instead of following the main path, he turned sharply left and climbed a steep trail between the rocks. Thunder protested but obeyed, his powerful hooves finding purchase on the loose stones. It was a dangerous shortcut. One misstep and they would both fall into the void. But Silas trusted his horse and Thunder trusted him. They reached the top just in time. From above, Silas could see the bandits approaching along the canyon path. They were about to pass right beneath him. He waited, held his breath, and at the exact moment he acted. Silas threw his lasso toward a loose rock at the edge of the cliff. With a precise pull, he triggered a small avalanche that blocked the bandits' path. The stolen horses stopped short, frightened by the falling rocks. The bandits pulled on their reins, confused and trapped. This way, Silas shouted, going down the other side of the canyon. Before the thieves could react, Silas was already among the stolen horses, stampeding them back toward the village. Thunder weaved with precision, guiding the herd away from the criminals. The bandit leader drew his gun, but Silas was faster. With an expert flick of his lasso, he hooked the weapon and yanked it from his hand. Get out of here, Silas roared. And never come back. The bandits, now with no extra horses and no weapons, had no choice but to flee. They disappeared into the canyon like the cowards they were. Silas had won, but the victory came at a price. As he guided the horses back, the sky suddenly darkened. A violent, unpredictable summer storm broke over the desert. Rain fell with fury, lightning lit up the sky, and Silas, exhausted from the chase, felt his strength abandon him. A loose rock, a slip, and everything went black. When Maitna saw the horses return to the village alone, her heart stopped. "Where is Silas?" She asked the warriors who had tried to follow him. No one knew. Without thinking, Maitna took a horse and rode into the storm. Rain soaked her face, wind lashed her body, but she didn't care. She had to find him. She found him near the canyon entrance. He was lying among the rocks, unconscious. He had a deep cut on his forehead, and his body trembled with cold. "No, no, no," Maitna whispered, kneeling beside him. "Don't you dare leave me, not after everything you've done." With all her strength, she managed to pull him onto the horse. She held him against her chest the whole way back, shielding him from the rain with her own body. When they reached the village, she took him straight to her tipi. For 2 days, Maitna never left his side. She lowered his fever with cold compresses, cleaned his wound with herbal water, spoke to him in whispers even though he couldn't hear her. "Wake up," she begged. "Please, wake up." On the 3rd day, Silas opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was Maitna's face. She had deep, dark circles and messy hair. Clearly, she hadn't slept in days. "Why?" he asked in a weak voice. "Because you saved my son," she answered, "and now I've saved you." Their eyes met, and in that moment both knew something between them had changed forever. A week had passed since the storm. Silas could now walk without help. The wound on his forehead had healed, leaving only a small scar that Maitna said gave him character. His feet finally healed, no longer hurt when he stepped. There were no excuses to stay, and yet every morning he found a reason not to leave. Today he'd help repair a damaged tipi. Tomorrow he'd teach the young men how to throw a lasso. The next day he'd accompany the hunters to look for deer. The truth was simple, he didn't want to leave. Every evening Silas and Maitna sat by the river to watch the sun disappear behind the mountains. They didn't always talk. Sometimes silence was enough. But when they talked, hours passed like minutes. Maitna told him about her husband, how they had met as teenagers, how he had been a great warrior respected by all, how the illness had slowly consumed him until he was gone. "I loved him deeply," she said one afternoon, "but love isn't something that runs out. The heart always has room for more." Silas told her about his past, his parents dying when he was 12, the years wandering from town to town, working on ranches, sleeping under the stars, loneliness becoming his only companion. "I never thought I'd find a place where I wanted to stay," he confessed. Until now. Their eyes met. Maitna felt her heart race. Silas felt the world disappear around him, but neither said anything more. Ahanu, for his part, had adopted Silas as his new hero. He followed him everywhere, asked endless questions, and every night before bed he asked Silas to tell him stories of the Old West. "Silas, are you going to stay forever?" the boy asked one night. Silas looked at Maitna, who pretended to be busy sewing a blanket. "I don't know, little one. It's not only up to me." "Then who does it depend on?" Silas didn't answer, but Maitna stopped sewing for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He got up and walked to the river. The full moon lit up the water, creating a silver path that seemed to lead to infinity. He sat on his favorite rock and let his thoughts wander. What was he doing? He was a cowboy, a drifter. He had nothing to offer. Maitna deserved someone better, someone from her own people, someone who understood her traditions, her language, her culture. "You can't sleep." Maitna's voice startled him. She stood behind him, wrapped in a wool blanket. "Neither can you, apparently," he replied. Maitna sat beside him. For several minutes neither spoke. They just listened to the sound of the river and the crickets singing in the dark. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Silas said finally. Maitna felt as if someone had shot an arrow through her chest. "Why?" "Because if I stay one more day, I'll never be able to leave, and that wouldn't be fair to you." "Fair to me?" Maitna turned to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of confusion and pain. "Who are you to decide what's fair to me?" "Maitna, I have nothing. I'm a man without a home, without family, without a future. You deserve more. And if what I deserve is you." The silence that followed was the longest of their lives. Maitna took a breath and continued. "Since you arrived, something changed in me. For the first time since I lost my husband, I felt again. I laughed again. I dreamed about the future again, and all of that is because of you." "Maitna, let me finish," she interrupted him. "In my culture, when a woman finds a worthy man, she has the right to speak, and I'm going to speak now." She stood in front of him, the moon lighting her face. In that moment, Silas thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. "You gave your boots to my son without knowing him. You risked your life to get our horses back. You've treated my people with respect and kindness. You are the noblest man I have ever met." Maitna extended her hand toward him. Silas, the homeless cowboy. "I offer you my home, I offer you my heart, I offer you a family. My son already loves you like a father, and I love you like a man." The words floated in the night air. "Stay," she continued, her voice breaking for the first time. "Not as a guest, not as a stranger. Stay as my husband, be Ahanu's father, be my partner until the sun stops rising." Silas felt his eyes fill with tears. He who hadn't cried since his parents' death now felt tears streaming down his cheeks. "Are you sure?" He whispered, "Do you really want me?" Maitna smiled through her own tears. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Silas stood, took Maitna's hands in his, and beneath the moonlight by the river that had witnessed so many of their conversations, he said the words that would change his destiny. According to your tradition, how long do I have to give you an answer? 3 days, Silas nodded slowly. Then prepare yourself, Maitna, because in 3 days I will give you the most important answer of my life. The first day Silas disappeared. No one knew where he was. His horse Thunder was still in the corral, so he couldn't have gone far, but he wasn't in the village. Maitna tried not to worry. She had given him 3 days. She had to respect his time, but every hour that passed without seeing him was torture. Ahanu was inconsolable. Did he leave? He asked with tear-filled eyes. Did Silas leave forever? I don't know, my child, Maitna answered, hugging him. We can only hope. What no one knew was that Silas was in the mountains. He had climbed before dawn, carrying only a blanket and a knife. He needed to think. He needed to be sure, because the decision he was about to make would change not only his life but also Maitna's and Ahanu's forever. For years, Silas had built walls around his heart, walls that protected him from pain but also from happiness. Walls that let him survive but not live. Maitna had torn down those walls without even trying. The second day he still stayed in the mountain. He watched the village from above. He could see Maitna's tipi by the river. He could see Ahanu playing with the other children, still wearing his old cowboy boots. He could see the life he could have if only he could find the courage to take it. Did he deserve to be happy? That was the question tormenting him. He had spent so many years alone that he had forgotten what it felt like to belong to something. He had spent so many years without love that he had forgotten what it felt like to be loved. But Maitna had reminded him of all of that. Her smile when he told stories, her laughter when Ahanu played tricks, her hands healing his wounds with a tenderness he had never known, her eyes looking at him as if he were the most valuable man in the world. She saw him. She truly saw him, not the wandering cowboy, not the lonely orphan, but the man he could be if someone gave him a chance. The third day dawned with a clear sky. Maitna hadn't slept all night. She sat in front of her tipi, looking toward the mountains, waiting. Her heart beat with a mix of hope and terror. What if he didn't come back? What if her offer had frightened him? What if she had misunderstood everything? The hours passed slowly. The sun rose in the sky. Noon came and went. Afternoon began to fall, and then she saw him, a figure coming down the mountain, walking with a firm step toward the village, toward her. It was Silas. Maitna stood up, her heart beating so hard she thought it would explode. Ahanu ran from where he was playing and stopped beside his mother, taking her hand. He came back, the boy whispered. Mama, he came back. Silas entered the village. People stopped what they were doing to watch him. Everyone knew what was happening. Everyone waited to see what he would do. He walked directly to Maitna. He stopped in front of her. His blue eyes met her dark eyes. For an eternal moment neither spoke. Then slowly Silas removed his hat, the hat that had been his only constant possession for years, the hat that identified him as a cowboy, a drifter, a man without roots. He held it in his hands for a moment, and then with a solemn gesture he placed it on the ground at Maitna's feet. A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone understood the meaning of that gesture. Maitna, Silas said, his voice firm but full of emotion. I have spent my whole life searching for something without knowing what it was. I thought it was freedom. I thought it was adventure, but I was wrong. He paused, taking her hands in his. What I was searching for was a home, and I found it here with you, with Ahanu, with your people who welcomed me as one of their own. Ahanu squeezed his mother's hand, holding his breath. I have no land to offer you, Silas continued. I have no gold, no cattle. I only have my heart, my loyalty, and my promise to love and protect you until my last breath. Maitna felt tears streaming down her cheeks. I accept being your husband, Silas said. I accept being Ahanu's father. I accept this life you offer me, because without you all I have no life. Maitna could contain herself no longer. She threw herself into his arms and held him with all her strength. Silas wrapped himself around her, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her scent, feeling that he had finally come home. Ahanu ran to them and joined the embrace, laughing and crying at the same time. I knew you would stay, the boy shouted. I knew it. The whole village erupted in celebration. Drums began to beat. Women sang ancient songs of love and union. The elders nodded with approval. Kuruk approached the new family and placed his hand on Silas's shoulder. Welcome home, son, he said simply. That night under the desert stars, Silas and Maitna sealed their union according to the tribe's traditions. And when the sun rose the next day, they were no longer two lonely souls. They were a family. Years later, people still told the story of the cowboy who gave his boots to a lost child and found the love of his life. And Ahanu, now a young warrior, still wore those same worn-out boots as his most prized possession, because they reminded him of the day a stranger gave him back his hope and gave him a father.